On today's Locked On Jayhawks, I'm going to be joined by Nick Schwert to do some KU basketball season prop picks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, welcome into another edition of Locked On Jayhawks with Nick Schwert, Derek Johnson here. You can hear me as well on Rock Chalk Sports Talk Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 on KLWN in Lawrence. You can also hear Nick over on 610 with Cody and Gold in the afternoons and also on the Wave in the Wheat podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's edition of the show, we're going to go over some fun KU season prop bets for the upcoming basketball season, which starts up Thursday for the first exhibition, Monday, the first regular season game for KU. I think it'll really start feeling real, though, once you get to game 3 against Duke. So I guess we'll just go ahead and get to the first prop bet here. I have for you, Nick, KU basketball over under 0.5 Big 12 regular plus postseason titles. So basically, if they win one Big 12 title, either regular or postseason, it's the over. What would you take?
I will take the over.
You feel pretty confident in that?
Yeah. I mean, doesn't history suggest that you're probably going to win the Big 12?
It does.
Like, here's the thing. I get it, especially for you. I'm not shitting on you here. But you talk Kansas basketball every day on the radio for 3 hours. You talk Kansas basketball every day on this podcast for 30 minutes. A lot of content. You can't just dismiss things and say, nope, not talking about that next like I can, right? I only do it a couple times a week, so it's easy for me to say, I'm not talking about Kansas not winning the Big 12. This is all they do. There have been a couple of seasons here and there where they didn't win it, but overall, you give me the data, the sample size, it's a pretty big one at this point in Bill Self's career. I'm telling you, I don't care what Texas has. I don't care what Baylor does well. I don't care about matchups. Bill Self wins the Big 12. This is how it works. So I'm just going to assume, once again, that Kansas is going to win the regular season Big 12. The tournament, they clearly don't put quite as much stock into it, and that's a little more volatile than the regular season as a whole, where you're given, so many chances playing everybody twice. So I'll take the over because I think they're going to win the regular season.
I will take the over as well. I could see them sharing with Baylor, but I don't think it's that crazy if you pick the under because Baylor is I don't know, like not be all end all favorite here, but they are the favorite over Kansas right now. And they were the preseason pick and whatnot. And then
are they the Vegas favorite?
Yes.
What's do you know the numbers?
It's very even. Last I saw was like Baylor was like plus 215 and Kansas was like plus 230, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think like from a roster construction, from a talent, like Baylor probably has more talent than Kansas does. Texas probably has more talent, but this isn't unique. This isn't the first time we've said that. Bill Self has an uncanny ability to get his team to win the games that you're not supposed to, because they always take care of business at home like nobody else does. And then they go on the road and they win those 50-50 games. It's not like they just like crush it on the road, but it's those games that could go either way that 90% of teams in the Big 12 in that same situation in a road environment are going to lose. Bill Self and Kansas has found a way to win those games. So I'm basically just breaking down how you win the Big 12, but I mean, that's how it's worked for the better part of the last 20 years at Kansas.
Okay, how about this next one? What will be better for this team, offense or defense? And you can look at this different ways. You can, just go what you think is better. You can go based on like Ken Palm, offensive and defensive adjusted efficiency. What do you think is going to be the better unit?
Man, you look at Bill Self's time at Kansas, and I wish I would have. If you were to go back over what year will this be? His first year was 2003,
04. Yeah.
So this would be. Is this year number 20 that he's entering?
Yes.
How many of those seasons, I'm looking at it right now. I don't know. Maybe you already did this. How many of those seasons do you think that Kansas's defense finished higher in adjusted efficiency on Ken Palm than the offense did?
It's funny because when you think of Bill Self, especially like, maybe 5 years ago, you automatically always thought about defense. But he has had some like really good offenses. I think it's probably less than you would think. But let's see. If you have 19 seasons, I'll say that the defense was better than the offense. I don't know, 8 times.
12, which
Wow.
is
Okay.
honestly still lower than I was expecting. I was expecting most of the time for it to be the D. Like I would have guessed maybe 16 or 17. But you're right, because you look at recent years. Last year, the offense ranked 6th in the country. The defense was 17th. The year before, 2021, the defense won it, but the defense was better in 2020. It was that stretch with Frank Mason and Devontae Graham. That's kind of, I think, what you're probably thinking of. And it's the same thing I was thinking of, where this team just stretched the floor and shot a ton, and Landon Lucas was the big guy, so they didn't have that elite rim protector. And that's really what we're talking about here. We can look at like Marcus Garrett or these great wing defenders, or these great guard defenders. But most of the time when Kansas has had an elite defense, they've had an elite rim protector. I don't think they have that this year. Who knows? Maybe Ernest Udeh becomes that guy. But you got DaJuan Harris and Kevin McCullough. And those might be, like, respectively, top 5 defenders at their position in college basketball, which is funny to say about McCullough because I don't even know what position he plays. Like, is he the 2 or is he the 4? It probably doesn't really matter the way that Kansas is going to play. But you've got 2 like borderline elite defenders on this team. Can those 2 guys playing in the backcourt be enough to make up for if you don't end up having an elite rim protector? Because just knowing that those 2 guys are going to create transition opportunities, and all the question marks I do have about this offense, who's going to space the floor? Can Jalen become an alpha that you can run offense through? Is there going to be any reliable scoring from the 5 position? There's a lot of questions I have about that offense. Just knowing the history, knowing the questions I have about the offense, and knowing that McCullough and DaJuan Harris are both going to be plus defenders, to me, it's defense.
Yeah, it's defense for me. I think this is going to be a top 10 defense in the country. If the center does come along and they get the rim protection, you could make a case to me this will be one of the top 3 to 5 defenses in the country. Everything you said about the perimeter, I mean, I've said this a bunch and I'll continue to say it. Texas Tech was the number 1 defense in the country last year. Kevin McCullough was the best defensive player on the best defensive team in the country.
And now he's playing for the best defensive coach in the country.
Yeah, and I know like Sam Vecini, who you've had on your show with Waving the Wheat, and you know we've had on RCST at different points, mentioned this in an article. He ranked the top 25 wings or something like that for the college basketball season with The Athletic. He said he's the best defensive perimeter player in the country. So, yeah, I don't think it'd be crazy for that. And maybe, who knows, maybe the lack of a proven center or one guy who steps up works in the favor of the defense, because if you're just playing like 3 guys that you're just like, hey, just go out there, just play really physical. If you get in foul trouble, whatever, like there's no separation between our centers anyway. We're just going to play super physical down low and cause other teams problems. The next one that we have for you here, over under 35% from 3 as a team for Kansas.
What they shoot last year as a team?
It's 36.
So barely over. And I'm assuming the reason why you chose 35 is year in, year out, that's usually about the nation average. Is that correct?
It's a little bit of both. So I know CJ Moore just kind of detailed this in The Athletic, that typically the teams who win the Big 12, you got to shoot 35% or better. And we've also typically seen there's a bit of a line between Bill Self teams. You know, there's the 2020 team with Udoka Azubuike. They were just so good on 2-point shots with Doak and Dotson getting inside, and so good defensively that they shot like 34%, but it didn't really matter. But pretty much all the other teams, like if they've been below 35%, you go look at some past Bill Self teams. A lot of those are the teams that maybe weren't as good.
What's crazy is that you only really had 2 guys that were plus shooters on your team last year. Like, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like Jalen Coleman-Lands was a plus shooter, but he didn't play
in the rotation.
Right. But that was Ochai and Christian carrying the load, because Ochai was nearly 41%. Christian was about 39%. The only way this happens is 2 guys I'm looking at: Gradey Dick and Kevin McCullough as an X factor. I keep hearing that, like, well, he wasn't a great shooter, but that offense wasn't really designed for him to do it, and people like his stroke. whatever. Like generally, if you're going to be a plus shooter, you get a glimpse of that. Like I'm not just going to blindly assume that because he's going to be in a better offense with more talent that's going to space the floor and they'll be playing at a faster tempo that all of a sudden he's going to be a great shooter. But I don't know where else it comes from, Derek. Gradey's the non-negotiable. If he's not a 38, 39% three-point shooter, then the answer is no, because I can't imagine it would be that way unless this team just doesn't hardly shoot any threes, which I guess you could entertain.
I mean, maybe I was honestly a little surprised at KU Mediaville. Bill Self said that I envision this team's going to try to play faster and shoot more threes than last year's team, which I was a little caught off guard with that because of what you just mentioned. Like you could argue that, okay, if Gradey Dick is the team's best 3-point shooter, the second and third best might be Cam Martin and Zach Clemence, but how much are either one of those going to play? And even if Zach Clemence is your starter playing 20, 25 minutes a game, even though maybe they tailor the offense a little bit more around that, like even big men who have shot well from three under Bill Self, what are they taking? 2 a game, 2.5 per game. So maybe it's up to 3 with a tailored offense around Zach Clemence. So if your second best 3-point shooter and your third best are combining for 3 3-pointers a game, it's going to be tough to get up there. You have to have a lot of improvement from Jalen Wilson and Kevin McCullough. I would probably take the under on this. I think it's around 34.
You might be right, but funny enough, it's only happened 5 times in Bill Self's time at Kansas where they've shot below 35%. And 2 of those 5 times came in the last 3 years, 2021 and 2020, when they were like the best team in the country with a bullet. And I don't think anybody was leaving that season saying, like, if only they could have made more threes. No, they were like the team to beat heading into March. So if you're telling me that Jalen Wilson's going to be unstoppable getting the ball downhill and this team's going to have some sort of, reliable go-to score down low, then I guess it could work. But I'm going to take the over only because I feel like they're going to have to. They're going to have to if they're going to be a top 10, 15 team in the country.
In just a moment, I've got some player props to get to for this team. This week's thrilling moment in college football is brought to you by Nissan. The thrilling designs behind the new lineup from Nissan are intended to empower drivers in vehicles as capable as the driver themselves. When I think of an unbelievable abilities on the field for this week's thrilling moment, it is anything except for the Miami-Virginia game. It was 14-12 through 4 overtimes. Neither team scored a touchdown, and there were no turnovers. So how did it end up like that? I don't know. If you did want a thrilling moment, anything but that game, how about Ohio State, Penn State, and KU game this weekend? But 45 fourth quarter points between the two of those. A lot better than the Miami-Virginia game. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. Okay, our first of the individual player props deals with Jalen Wilson. Over under 16 points per game for Jalen.
I will say over. Just because I think it will be a little bit more evened out than it was a season ago. I don't think Jalen's going to be like a 20-point per game score. But you go back even like to the year before that where you had 4 guys within 3 points. We've seen that a lot where your leading scorer averages 14, then there's a guy at 13, then there's a guy at 12 and 11. I think this is going to be a little bit more top heavy than that. I do think Jalen's is like a 16-point per game score. It's probably right around there. If it's under, I would probably say it's right under. But I think he will be a focal point enough. And I think one thing about him that he's so good at is driving downhill, getting to the rim. So even if like the efficiency is not there, I think he goes to the free throw line a lot. So I'm going to say over, but barely. And I think there is a significant gap between him and number 2, whoever that guy is.
Yeah, I would take the over on this. I think he's at 16.5, 17. What you said, I think Gradey Dick and Kevin McCullough are probably next at somewhere between like 12 to 13 points per game. And then there's a lot of guys in that kind of like 6 to 8 range, maybe.
Yeah. Well, think about this. Think about this too, Derek. In conference play, when he kind of really got going, he averaged 13 points per game in conference play, objectively as the 4th option. Like he was not getting the same amount of looks as Ochai, CB, or Dave, and he still averaged 13 a game. What's it going to look like now that he's the focal point?
Yeah, I think there's a real case to be made that if you think Kansas is going to be good enough to get a 1 seed or win the Big 12 or even get, a fringe 1 seed, 2 seed, whatever it is, obviously they're going to be in the national conversation. For Jalen to put up 17, 18 points per game, we know he's a good rebounder. He'll probably get 7, 8, 9 rebounds per game. I saw one book had him at 18-1 to win I think it was the Naismith Player of the Year. Obviously, there's so many different Player of the Year awards. I don't think that's a bad bet. I think there is some credence to that. So I would take the over on this as well. How about this one? Back to the 3-point competition or more 3-point makes this year. Zach Clemence or DaJuan Harris? Immediately your mind says Zach Clemence because he's the better shooter, but DaJuan Harris is going to be on the floor, you would think, more than Zach Clemence. And who knows, Zach Clemence might get buried in the depth chart. I don't know. So who makes more threes this year?
DaJuan Harris went 20 of 62 last year, and he was on the court a lot. Zach Clemence went 6 of 22. DaJuan Harris played over 1,000 more minutes last season than Zach Clemence and had
14
more threes. It's not even close. The answer is Zach Clemence.
But okay, what if DaJuan Harris, because we've seen this when Bill Self trusts the point guard, they play big minutes, right? And DaJuan last year played all those minutes. It was still 29 a game, I believe. So what happens if DaJuan Harris is playing 35 minutes a game and Zach Clemence is the third string center and he's only playing 8 to 10 minutes a game?
Listen, Derek, I love Zach. I love DaJuan Harris. I think he is a perfect point guard for running Bill's Self system. I love what he does. Great player. Have you seen him shoot the ball?
Efficient when he's open?
No. Have you seen him? Have you actually seen the act of him getting the ball, collecting, and then going into a shooting motion? Yeah. It's not pretty. It's not exactly what you would teach a young kid in terms of form and how to shoot the basketball. Now, maybe like Frank Mason before his senior year or Ochai Agbaji before his senior year, DaJuan comes back. He worked all offseason on his shooting stroke. That is not a pretty jumper. And here's how you know, is that it was surprising when DaJuan would make threes. And I'm not lying. I'm not trying to be mean. It just is. It was surprising when it would go in because it looks so jankety that you're just kind of like, well, I guess we'll take that. And it was to the point where, if he's hitting threes, then good luck stopping this team. I just don't think that's ever going to be what he does. You're probably right. He probably plays more this year, and that could lead to more shooting opportunities. But Clemence was, hardly in this rotation last year. He played 5 minutes a game. So the only way that he doesn't make more, because we know he likes to play outside in, the only way he doesn't make more is if you don't think he's a major part of this rotation. Now, maybe he only goes from 5 minutes a game to 12 minutes a game, but I think it's probably closer to that 15 to 20 range. And if that's the case, then he's just going to have the volume. And if he has the volume, he's a better shooter than DaJuan. So I'm taking Clemence without a second thought.
I'm going DaJuan. I'll do it.
All right.
I'll probably be wrong. Whatever.
Thank you for your courage.
Yeah. All right. This is maybe my favorite one. Over under 1.5 players in the Bill Self Doghouse this season.
Okay, so you have to put parameters on the Doghouse, don't you?
I think you know it when you see it. But like last year, obviously, I think we would, probably classify Remy Martin as being in the Bill Self Doghouse at a point. You could honestly, I don't know, maybe David McCormick was in the Bill Self Doghouse, but I think Dave never did anything because even he got benched against, I think, Oklahoma State and Mitch Lightfoot came in.
But always
that was that was more so like performance, I think, than actually like doing something that pissed off Bill Self.
Here's what I love is that with all the roster turnover, it's like, who could it be? We got a bunch of new faces. Who could it be? I don't think it's going to be any, like, it's not going to be Jalen. It's not going to be DaJuan. It's not going to be, well, I guess, shoot, that's really the only, McCullough. It won't be McCullough. Like, he just seems to, like, he's the perfect guy. So could it be one of the, like, the one, I bet you're is there one name that, like, kind of comes to mind for you?
I got a couple.
Okay, don't say it, but like there's one for me that's like, I can see you getting in some trouble this year, and it's Gradey Dick. And then the only reason is because guy who likes to shoot a ton. And it's not because he is going to get benched for shooting too much. It's that if that's your main priority and you're not doing the other stuff, it's a really easy way for Bill to be like, get on the bench, man. You're not playing defense. Like, hey, I love that you're taking 7 threes a game, but you've messed up our offensive sets. You were supposed to switch for 2 straight plays. You didn't do it. The other team scored because we had to rotate because you missed your spot. That's how you get benched. That's how you get into the doghouse. And he's just kind of got like a little bit of that cockiness to him, to where it's like, you better back it up with your play if you're going to be cocky. So nothing against Gradey Dick. I think he's going to be a fantastic player. I've talked to the kid. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, but just in terms of like stylistically, freshman likes to shoot a lot. That to me is that's a good jump off point for being in the Bill Self doghouse.
I mean, we could just go back to Zach Clemence here. Like, if you're shooting a lot, but you're the center and you're not getting rebounds inside, like Bill Self's not going to be happy.
Yeah, you're probably right, because he's the same thing except a big guy.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. There's actually a couple anytime you have young players in there.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, if the over-under is 1.5, it's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
How many freshmen are going to be playing on this team? It's one thing to get benched. It's one thing to just not play. That doesn't necessarily mean you're in the doghouse. That could just mean you're not good enough. See, being in the doghouse, here's the important thing. Being in the doghouse means you have to be good enough to want the coaches want to play you. If you're just not good, you're not in the doghouse. You're just on the bench. You know, like guys who play 2 minutes a game, you're not in the doghouse. You're just not very good. So it's like you also have to be somebody that they want to play, but they're not playing you because they're proving a point. So I'm going to say 1. I'm going to say 1, and it's going to be probably one of those 2 guys you mentioned.
Yeah, probably. All right, I'll agree with you on that one. I want to pitch you on another Heisman candidate. This is more of a hypothetical coming up in a second here. Do you have issues with sweaty pits and are worried to raise your hands up at work in fear of showing off your pit stains? What about worries about your odor? Well, I know if you're working through a long day, I'll have a day where I'm working here and then I'll go run a broadcast afterwards nearby, and you're working a 12 to 13 hour day and you don't have time to go home and put on some more deodorant or whatnot. You don't want to worry about the issues or the odor. SweatBlock wipes are a must-have for everyone's toiletry bag. Whether it's a big presentation or a hot date, everyone can benefit. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try SweatBlock. Save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com, also available on Amazon. Your Heisman candidate pitch for this week is an easy one. It's hypothetical, though. What if Jalon Daniels comes back this week against Oklahoma State, plays the final 4 games? What would he have to do to be back in consideration? Is that even possible at this point?
Hendon Hooker's making it really difficult. If
I'm not even saying to win it, because I think you're right. Let's just say like an invitation to New York, getting because you have a first, second, and third place vote, getting some sort of recognition.
Well, because here's the thing that you have to remember, and I think we may have talked about this last week. There is we try to make it as to, it's a 2-horse race now. We do it with the MVP too. Like people are saying it's a 2-horse race. It's Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. That is never true. It's never true. Bryce Young wasn't even in my top 3 heading into the final week of the regular season, and I voted for him to win. Because that's what happens with the Heisman. You need that big moment in critical situations. So, like, even at this point in the season, it feels like it's a 2-horse race between CJ Stroud and Hendon Hooker. There's a chance that either one of those guys could not even end up in the top 3. All it takes is one loss, boom, you drop down. Somebody else has a big game in the last week of the season, and you're on the outside looking in. CJ Stroud he was finished 4th last year in Heisman. So, to answer your question, what would it take? I mean, it would take ungodly numbers. Ungodly, like better than what he did to start the season. So he can't just come back and do what he did. He would have to come back and be better because he's just not going to have the numbers. And Kansas has dropped 3 games. So first off, they got to win all 4. Seriously. They have to win all 4 games. He has to come back this week. They have to win all 4. He's got 16 total touchdowns in 4 games. You have to at least eclipse 30, right? Like, I'm not crazy in saying that, right? You have to probably double your total and be super efficient.
I'm very interested if like let's say they even went 3-1, because then at that point you could say, yeah, but they're 8-2 with him as the starting quarterback, right? And let's say he had 300 total yards per game. So now you're looking at, almost 3,000 total yards on the season. Let's say he does get to 30 total touchdowns. The QBR, let's say, is still in the top 5. I wonder if we would just look at it as like the value thing and the value side of it. Because if you remember, like, I don't know if you remember the name Dennis Dixon for Oregon. He
Yeah,
was
of
having like
course.
a great season for them. And
Yeah.
then he got hurt. I think he missed the last 3 games. He still finished 5th in the Heisman voting. He got 17 first place votes. So there is a bit of precedent there.
So let me tell you this. I just looked this up, and I hadn't looked at Heisman odds in a while. Have you looked at Heisman odds recently?
No.
So, I mean, you know the names at the top. CJ Stroud's heavy favorite, then Hendon Hooker, Caleb Williams at USC, Blake Corum of Michigan, Bryce Young. So it's those top 5, and then it's like a pretty steep drop off to the guys like Stetson Bennett and Bo Nix and Jahmyr Gibbs, Drake May. What if I told you Jalon Daniels is still 15th in Heisman odds? Now,
That's interesting.
Now that is a little misleading because he is 100-1, and there's like a massive because like Spencer Sanders is 50-1, Dorian Thompson-Robinson at UCLA is 80-1, so is DJ Ugalele at 80-1, and then it gets to like 100-1. So Vegas is still considering him, but really you'd have to ask the question: is of all those names I mentioned at the top, at what point did I name a name where you said they could pass them? Like Bo Nix. Could he pass Bo Nix? Because that's when you're talking about being in consideration, you're probably talking about being in the top 8, in the top 6 of Heisman odds. And it would take a pretty impressive finish to the year for him to get into that.
He is Nick Schwert, and you can hear him on Waving the Wheat trying to pronounce DJ Uiagalelei's name again, or you can
Did
hear
I
him
say
on
ukulele?
Yeah, like ukulele. You can hear him on 610 with Cody and Gold. Nick, appreciate the time as always, man.
Later, man.
All right, that's Nick Schwert joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. We'll be back at it tomorrow. If you have anything you'd like for the show to talk about, you can hit us up with any comments on YouTube, or you can find me at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube or anywhere you find your podcast. That'll do it for today's episode. Have a good rest of your day. See some of you on Rock Chalk Sports Talk later today.